When thinking of Nintendo handheld consoles, what comes to mind? The Game Boy, the Game Boy Color, or the Game Boy Advance? Or do you think of the DS and 3DS era handhelds? Perhaps you even first think of the Nintendo Switch, since it is Nintendo's most recent handheld and console to this day. Besides the popular Nintendo handhelds, there were also a bunch of clone consoles that tried to disguise themselves as the original, which, let's be real here, was not successful. GB Boy Color. We all remember the iconic DMG Game Boy bundled together with Tetris. This was pretty much a staple of every family household that allowed their children to play video games. But this isn't about the Game Boy itself, rather it's about its successor, the Game Boy Color. Or I should say the Game Boy Color. Color? Oh wait, let me look this up. While the name of the handheld is British, the console itself is not. Well, at least it's made in China. The GB Boy Color from Kongfeng is overall pretty faithful to its original counterpart. I mean, if you hand this to someone who just remembers the GBC from their childhood, they probably won't notice. At first glance. Because at second, everyone and their pet goldfish will notice that the buttons look different. The select and start buttons are not made out of rubber and the D-pad is completely different. But the biggest giveaway is the screen. While the original GBC has a 9:10 aspect ratio screen, the clone features one with a shorter and wider aspect ratio, which stretches the image. Also, if you have a unit with a transparent shell, you can see two things. Firstly, that the black area at the top of the console is just for show. It's supposed to have the infrared sensor behind it, but you can clearly see through the shell that it's empty. And secondly, you can see a suspicious looking chip soldered on the motherboard. That chip is actually a multicard with ROMs loaded on it. When the device is boot up without any cartridge inserted, you will be greeted by the screen that says
188
games in one. But we all know that there are repeated ROMs. The correct number is 66, if you're interested. Revo K101. Moving on to the next clone, you probably heard of it. If you are familiar with the brand Anbernic. You must know, before Max Joe together with his brand got into the habit of releasing new Linux emulation handhelds based on the H700 chip every other month, they were creating Game Boy Advance handheld clones. The most popular is the Revo K101 Plus. It's gotten more popular, because recently Anbernic re-released this device even though it's pretty outdated. The initial release was back in 2013. This is mine from 2015. It's pretty beat up. You must understand, back in the day there were just not so many options to play GBA games on the handheld with a decent screen. The GBA SP AGS 101 was and is still a super expensive commodity. Those backlight mod kits for the GBA weren't so easy to come by, to install, and just not that refined. Take a look at my modded GBA from back then. I didn't use an original AGS 101 for this, I used some random backlight screen I got from eBay back then and I regret it. At first glance you could argue it's fine. But if you take a closer look, the display has severe ghosting, which makes me actually dizzy after playing for a while. Also, there just weren't many options for emulation handhelds like nowadays. The decision was either I play on a device with annoying drawbacks or on an Android phone. So back to the Revo K101 Plus. In my opinion, for what it wants to be, which is a GBA clone, it's great. I mean, it plays GBA games, duh, and not just ROMs, it plays GBA cartridges. It has a horizontal form factor, which at least I prefer, and a backlit screen. It's so much better than the original GBA when you think of it. I mean, you don't need any AA batteries. Okay, I have to be fair, you need a mini, not micro, mini USB cable to charge it, which is so outdated, but if you ask me, I'd rather take another USB cable with me than a pack of AA batteries. Also, if you have friends that have original GBA and GBA SP consoles, you can even link them up to the Revo and play multiplayer with them, because it has the link port. The only downside compared to a real GBA is that the Revo does not support Game Boy and Game Boy Color cartridges. You can only play them via ROM emulation, but you get those beautiful Superboy bezels when you launch the games. Overall, I really like the Revo K101 Plus. I mean, yeah, it feels nostalgic to me, but it does not compare well to the other competitive options in the market. I mean, as of now, Anbernic is asking for around $67 for not including shipping and taxes, which is definitely a high price if you want to play GBA games and are fine with ROM emulation. Also, they probably re-released it because I assume they found a random stock of blue/purple color devices somewhere and wanted to get rid of them. Only a complete fool would buy one now, since it's pretty much like buying a Switch remake of a game for the full price. Okay. Gamebox Advance SP. So I'm pretty sure we are all familiar with the Game Boy Advance SP clone of 2024. The RG35XX SP from Anbernic, which in my opinion is a true masterpiece when it comes to staying faithful to a retro design and turning it into a modern device. Well, except for the battery heatsink dilemma. But there was another clone handheld before that, and no, it's not the Powkiddy V90. Even before that, can you guess it? Let me give you a hint. Take the name Game Boy Advance SP and only change one letter. What do you get? Correct, the Gamebox Advance SP. The Gamebox is pretty much the most faithful clone to its original console from ones that I've been showing you in this video. It literally looks the same, only if you know the original GBA SP in and out or compare them side by side, you'll notice the hardware differences. The buttons on the Gamebox feel much stiffer and more clicky than on the original SP, especially the trigger buttons. And then there is the screen. It's slightly taller on the Gamebox than on the original SP, which results in a marginally different aspect ratio, which I would only notice if someone told me. But the screen is backlit. Again, that's a common theme among the clone handhelds. Their screens do what Nintendo don't. But similar to the Revo, you can't play Game Boy or Game Boy Color cartridges on the Gamebox. Well, you can insert them, but the handheld won't load the games. Overall, it's a fine console. This time, it's not even a Chinese handheld. It seems to be from a Russian company XQ, which distributed this handheld to Eastern countries, but I'm not too sure about the history of this particular handheld. So I've showed you 3 handheld clones so far, and you know what? Why not just for fun include a 4th one as a bonus? Nintendo DS ML. I have to confess that I have no clue what ML stands for. Maybe Macro Light? Seeing this, you would probably say, this is just a rehoused fat Nintendo DS. Then I would say, yeah, you think so? Well, you're right. In the end, it is more or less a NDS fat, OG, first gen, or whatever you want to call it, but rehoused into a shell that is modeled after the Nintendo DS Lite design. To me, playing this handheld weirdly feels nostalgic and fresh at the same time. I grew up with the NDS Fat because back then I had the option to either get the Nintendo DS Lite or the NDS Fat with a game. And I think you can guess what your boy chose in the end. I chose the fat chunky boy together with LEGO Star Wars 2 as my very first game, besides the Metroid Prime Hunters demo of course. Overall, the NDS ML feels good in your hands. The shell even includes a stylus that is in the style of the Nintendo DS Lite and a GBA slot cover. The only flaw on my unit are the screens. Sadly, they both have dead pixel lines. I got mine on AliExpress and it was the last unit in stock of that particular seller. I bought it from that specific seller because it was by far the cheapest option, but in the end it might have been a mistake. Nonetheless, it's a fun novelty handheld I don't really intend on using anyways, because I'm privileged enough to own other handhelds to play DS games. So this is my somewhat nostalgic retrospective on some rather unknown or forgotten clone consoles. If you would ask me if they are worth it, I would say in general, no. because there are much cheaper and much more versatile alternatives when it comes to emulating ROMs. However, when it comes to playing actual cartridges, you might want to give them a shot. If you can still find them, that is. While you can find the Revo K101 Plus, which has been re-released by Anbernic recently as the Burnic K101 Plus, and the Nintendo DS ML on AliExpress, you can't find any listing on the GB Boy Color anymore. Also, I bought the Gamebox Advance SP through an eBay listing I found by surprise years ago, so I wouldn't bet on that. You might be luckier than me though. Anyways, this is all I got for this video, and thanks for sticking around till the end. I really appreciate it. I would also really be thankful if you smash the like button, and if you like the content, subscribe to the channel. Okay, thanks for watching, that's it, bye!